the elections happened. But then all this huge youth aspiration didn't know what to do. First time I observed that the middle class of the country has come out for a top-down change to reconnect with India. Gandhi did this, Vivekananda did this. I will have to validate them and meet people. Setting up a university was never in the plan. All private university efforts are run by big business houses or politicians. Other than reading civics in 8th, 9th, 10th, people didn't have much sense of how do I even bring change. In India, academia doesn't play a role in policy making. We have restricted our mandate to degrees and jobs.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the IC India podcast. Over the last few episodes, we have been trying to get you the insider's perspective on what various professions entail, possible entry paths into them, barriers to entry, and what to expect life to look like once you're in it. You've got those in senior management positions at consulting, IT, and banking organizations. We have got one of the leading venture capital fund managers of the country, and we have got a Filmfare-nominated screenwriter.
Now, what if you're someone who has a burning desire to do social good? Someone who is eyeing the world of social entrepreneurship? No, our guest today gives us an insight into this very fascinating world and shares fresh perspectives about the future of education in India. He holds a B.Tech in Computer Science from IIT Bombay, an MS in Computer Science and Engineering from the University of Washington, and an MBA from the Indian School of Business. All very enviable credentials. And yet, his desire to give back led him to take some very unconventional decisions, like a volunteering stint in Suriname, scaling the nationwide volunteering movement Youth for Seva, opting out of the B-School placement process to set up the Vision India Foundation, an entity that has since evolved and been rechristened to Rishihood University, India's first and only impact-focused university. Enjoy this illuminating talk with Shobhit Mathur, co-founder and vice-chancellor at Rishihood University.
Thank you, Megha, and thank you, Abhinav, for having me on this. Coming to my background, I'm from a typical middle-class family. I'm from Hyderabad in India, which is south-central India, and I'm in a middle-class family born in 80s. My dad is from State Bank, and my mom was a school teacher. So a typical middle-class background in that sense. So what is interesting, and it also fits in the theme of our conversation today, is for many people, even to this day, education is the means to come out of, I don't know, poverty, you can say it, not poverty exactly, but even if you want to step out and achieve success, education is the only means in India in many ways, right? And a lot of lives have transformed. So a huge focus on education, naturally so. And then because you are right in some ways that if you're good in math, you choose engineering. So I was good in maths. So, and then IIT happened. I mean, I was in the top 100 rank of IIT JEE. So I got into IIT Bombay, computer science. Nobody knows what's computer science. I never used a computer before that, but that's how you choose because that's the in thing. So I ended up there, great institution, did a lot of things. But what is again very interesting is that if you come from the part of the country that I am, particularly southern India, higher education is always valued over starting a business or working for someone, right? So there's a focus on education. Plus there's a huge fascination to go abroad. So consequently, I decided to go abroad and I came to UW Seattle. I did my master's in computer science. I chose to take a break for a couple of months. That's a very interesting phase in my life. But I chose to defer my joining date at Amazon and go for a couple of months for you could call it a volunteering internship to South America. So I volunteered in a country called Suriname for 2 months. I think that's perhaps one of the more bolder decisions I have taken, and that was the first of the many that came in. That for many people, going to the US and getting a job would be the biggest thing, right? So to defer your first pay package and then volunteer full time, but it worked very well in my favor. Interned for 2 months in a Dutch-speaking country in the middle of nowhere in South America, and nobody has heard of the country before. At least my close friends didn't hear it. I came back, I worked for Amazon, did a few things. Then I came back to India because I had this strong sense of coming back and contributing to India. And that's when my computer science journey ended. And I decided to go full-time in the social sector. I volunteered for 5 years full-time. I built something called Youth for Seva, a volunteering platform for youth in India. I scaled it up nationally, and then I took a study break again. I did my MBA from the Indian School of Business, then got into public policy, which eventually has become a university now called the Rishihood University. So that's my journey from Hyderabad to Seattle to back to India, and now building a university in India.
Lots of bold decisions there. How did you end up going into the whole volunteering and social sector? Like the decision, how did you decide that you wanted to do that?
Okay, so it's interesting. See, since till even I landed up at UW, I think the focus always was excellence in education and consequently for a job. And many people from southern India would say it is to immigrate, right? Because there are no opportunities in India that can match our caliber. So it is great to settle down. All our uncles and our aunts are there. So it's always that drives us to go there, right? And then I started meeting a bunch of people with very different interests that I had no background of. For me, it was a particularly STEM-focused education till then. And then people would ask you questions about your identity, right? If I walk in my graduate school, my office mates would ask me very curious questions about India, would ask me about what my beliefs are, how it would compare. Not in a very racist way, but in a very curious way, right? And then you would think that, oh my God, I think I am the most educated chap, but I am unable to articulate anything about myself or what my beliefs are, where do I come from, what's our history, right? So this thing really hit me very hard that we think we are smart, but we are not, right? Because we don't know on what ground we are standing. So this happened. That's one of the reasons. Second interesting thing happened. There's in 2005, a Katrina hurricane that had come in New Orleans, right? So I just got into some campus volunteering activity to raise money, right? We used to help in the football stadium, in the parking lots and get some money. So I raised some money and I worked with a bunch of different folks. So again, that was one experience in volunteering. So series of such things happened where I felt that perhaps my abilities are beyond just math and computers, right? It is, I need to expand, and I'm doing well when I do other things which are more people focused, social focused. Secondly, a lot of curiosity to learn about my own self and my ancestors and my history. That always triggered something. So we started doing a bunch of campus activities around this, build a lot of Indian student clubs there. So this was how it all started. But then it continued because I think suddenly I found a very different fulfillment doing that. So I talked to an organization called Seva International. It's very popular in the US now. After COVID also there is a lot of money there. So I told them I want to volunteer, and I don't want to volunteer in my comfort zone, that is either India or US, but I want to go for an internship to some other country. So interestingly, this Suriname thing happened because Suriname has an Indian diaspora. About 35% of the population is an Indian diaspora, right? It's a very, very interesting history. People from Eastern UP and Bihar came as indentured laborers and they made it big there, right? So they said, okay, go to this country in South America. I said, wow, I mean, I don't know about this place, but it's always to test yourself and see how much, are you really interested about this or it's just a hobby, right? Can you do more of this? So that was a very testing time. I would not say I achieved a lot when I went there, but it taught me a lot about myself, right? Because we're in a very different setup. In some ways, it has an Indian background, but it is not, because it's about 120 years since they migrated. So a lot of things have changed. So it's a very interesting phase of my life. Naturally, when I do all this and I see that, okay, a job in Amazon is possibly not the highest thing that I can achieve, right? I mean, possibly there's much more for me. So I thought one thing led to the other. I just quit my job. I quit my job in Amazon and flew the next day. I just took my flight and I went back to India without having anything as a backup. Though I came back to Hyderabad, Amazon had a development center in Hyderabad, but I didn't choose that. So it was to make a fresh start. So I think may sound foolish, but it was, I think if that I would have not done that, I would have not been where I am today. So you'll have to restart and build on whatever your gut is, right? So I took a lot of decisions with my gut, and then one thing led to the other, and I've reached so far. Yeah.
And then what was the next step after that leap of faith? So how exactly did the idea of setting up Rishihood University come about?
Yeah, so setting up a university was never in the plan because in India, nobody imagines setting up universities, especially people like me who don't have either father who runs an industry or is a politician, right? So all private university efforts are run by big business houses or politicians or the people who do a lot of different things, right? So it's very different in India. So it is not about university, but see, when I came back, my life till then in India was very, very focused at home, education, job, right? I would never even go out and do anything else. So my awareness of society was very less. So one thing that I learned while I read about people who made a difference, right, in Indian history, a lot of them traveled. So I really took up and I traveled. I traveled across the country. I mean, really to the border areas like Arunachal Pradesh, Ladakh, various parts of the country I went, I met people, tried to understand what the issues, because if I don't have a connect with the people, I might have my fancy imaginations of what the problem is, but I will have to validate them and meet people. So that was a very interesting phase, right? To reconnect with India and travel. So Gandhi did this, Vivekananda did this. Anybody you think who has made a difference has traveled, right? Because it's so diverse. You can't make a simplistic conclusion about anything in India. They say whatever is true, exactly the opposite is also true, right? So it is that. So I did that, taught me a lot about India. One thing that was very, very interesting was many people wanted young talent to come in the social sector. So if you think of India, the thing is, unlike the US, where you have very formal development studies and humanities programs, right? Here, people who want to be in the development sector or social sector, there is no formal training. You may have a sociology, anthropology, programs like that, but they are more academic in nature. They are not meant for people who want to be development professionals. There is a big crisis. There's so many challenges to be solved, but the young talent is not trained. So that gave me an idea that we should possibly start a platform that can engage young people into voluntary work. So that is where the idea of Youth for Seva came up. And it was, there's already an initiative like this running in Bangalore. So a good friend of mine. So I started the Hyderabad chapter of that. So this resulted in a huge success because if you think of the Indian scenario at that time, a lot of people are moving to cities for IT sector related jobs. And they are coming from really poorer backgrounds or the hinterlands. They have suddenly reached prosperity because they see big paychecks, great lifestyle. There's a deep sense of guilt and a sense of I should contribute back because I've come from a very difficult place and I want to contribute. Their weekends are free. There is no community that they can be a part of because they've come out of their families. So this thing of give me 2 hours of volunteering time, I would just go and make this call in many corporates. That I would get the people in the hall and I would say, who can give me 2 hours this weekend, right? Many people would raise their hand. Then I would train them and engage them into volunteering work. So this turned out to be amazing because a lot of people, first of all, like me, got a first-hand exposure of social problems. A lot of non-profits, government, the schools, they got access to talent, which they didn't have. The people who got touched the youth who volunteered, their lives genuinely transformed. Alright, so because they first time see a girl child is not able to go to high school because the parents can't afford, right? They are able to see how a pediatric cancer patient is about to die and the family is broken. Various things, right? So we were never exposed to this side of society ever, right? So people get exposed to, they totally transform internally and in their capacity, they try to make a change. Many people quit corporate careers, took up social work full time. They joined my team. A lot of things happened. So a very fascinating journey in that sense. So now to connect it back to, that is one exposure to India, its challenges, the youth aspirations. But what I always realized is that the change is not sticking. For example, you go to a government school, there is no teacher. So you will teach because you think, there's no teacher. The students are not able to study. I know maths, I can teach maths, right? So you go and teach. You do it week over week, right? But that's not going to stick because one fine day you will have some constraints, you will have to quit. So why is there such high amount of teacher absenteeism or quality of teaching is poor, right? Or government hospitals are unhygienic or so many different things. Why is the trash on the streets? And you can as volunteers only do so much. So 2 things don't happen through volunteering work, I realized. One is sustainability. That is, the change doesn't stick. Second thing is scale. You can't scale. After 5 years of efforts, possibly I touched 100 government schools in Hyderabad, right? And maybe a few more hundred across the country. But there are over 2 lakh schools in the country, right? You can never solve it through social work. It's a policy problem. It is a problem that comes top down. So bottom-up work is important because it's urgent. But then unless you solve the top-down problem, things are not going to change. So something very interesting happened when I was coming to this conclusion. In India, about a decade back, there was a movement called the India Against Corruption movement. And then there was this whole movement of Narendra Modi and his pitch for prime ministership, right? For the first time, I observed that the middle class of the country has come out for a top-down change. Middle class never came out for top-down change. Because always my parents taught me, you should not bother about all this. Stay away from this. Make your own life. Immigrate if you want. But there's nothing that you can do. System is broken. Sab kharab hai dese, right? Sab chor hai, right? These are popular slogans. So it is seen it's a hopeless situation. You don't change. But then the change happened. And once that happened, what's interesting is the elections happened. Regime change happened. But then all this huge youth aspiration didn't know what to do. Because they went out to the polling booth and voted. But now they want to contribute to policy, they want to contribute to politics, but there's no platform for them. So that's when this idea came up that we should just like I set up Youth for Seva, can we set up a similar platform to engage people to bring top-down change also, right? Because aspiration is there, the need is there, right? Can we connect? Structured opportunities are still less, but a lot of interesting policy education workshops, a lot of people were engaged actively into politics, into policy as consultants, into research, into public policy issues. So it was called Vision India Foundation. And I moved to Delhi for that reason. And it became a really big movement that because this whole youth aspiration was waiting to share their ideas. Okay, we want to clean rivers. I can give you 1 year's time and work with the water ministry to do it, right? If you want any economic problems to be solved, I have done. So people were willing to just give their time to change the country, right? And you'll see a lot of this. That you feel that the right leader is in place, right? The talent is missing. I can volunteer time and do this. So they were looking for platforms and opportunities. So we created a lot of that, a lot of public policy education, because other than reading civics in 8th, 9th, 10th in India, people didn't have much sense of what this means, right? How do I even bring change? So we needed to do an entire public policy re-education for many people, right? So that happened. It was very interesting. So the whole policy change thing happened. Now, I know the story is becoming long, but I'm just sharing my journey because how I have thought of bringing change is important for a young person who also wants to intervene. This is also not enough because at best, what did we do? We infused young talent that is hardworking, possibly non-corrupt, tech-savvy into the system, right? But at the end of the day, you can make the system more efficient. But it fundamentally doesn't change because the ideas don't change, right? Suppose I have to solve poverty in India, right? Now, how do I think, right? The models are still, okay, we pick up some Western model or we'll do this or we'll do that or some other thing that worked in Africa, you'll try to apply it here. You'll come up with very bizarre problem statements which don't exist. Like, for example, AIDS was never a problem in India, right? But you thought because it's an African problem, it's an Indian problem. Aid comes from the Gates Foundation, you apply it. There is a lack of ideas, and it is not the role of non-profits to create ideas. I mean, new ideas for Indian problems, right? How to solve them. That is the role of academia. That is the role of higher education. So research is a very important component to design uniquely Indian solutions to Indian problems. And this realization also came because of my exposure to education in the West. Academia in the US plays a very, very significant role in policy making. In India, academia doesn't play a role in policy making. We have restricted our mandate to degrees and jobs. So we have to build a university which will stand for hundreds of years, play a role in not just producing good talent for the country, but also great ideas for solving the national problems. So this, I would say 3 reasons, right? In the sense that you will have to build something that is an institution that is your legacy, is going to stand after you're gone, is going to be there for hundreds of years after you're gone. This thought doesn't exist in India. people don't think generational, right? They think very immediate. So that was very important. Second thing is you'll have to keep producing leaders who will go into various walks of life, and whichever time in history there's a problem to be solved, they will be a part of it. So you'll have to produce that. And you'll have to produce Indian solutions to Indian problems. So this naturally converges into a university. So that's where the idea of Rishihood University came up, that you'll have to build this. So yeah, it is again in the series of bold decisions, you decide to go ahead and build a university. It sounded like a very fantastic and irrational idea at that time. But then it happened. It happened during very difficult times like COVID.
Nice. I'm just marveling at how observant you've been of the changing shifts on a societal level and the undercurrents, and were able to remain ahead of the curve to, as you said, take those bold decisions that would, benefit things in the long run. So from what I hear, of course, the three things that primarily led to a series of steps to Rishihood University as it stands today is you wanted it to be a sustainable way of keeping change, and you wanted it to be at scale, and you wanted to localize it to context. So these were the three. So because I couldn't help noticing that, Rishihood University calls itself an impact university. So I was just curious as to what makes it so much more impact focused vis-a-vis any other institution out there.
I mean, it's not used very casually. I mean, you can say impact. Everybody's saying we are creating impact, right? Anything that you do creates impact. So how can you just... So that it comes from this background that I'm saying, that it has to... you'll have to infuse this thought that your education is not just for your personal ends. I mean, it is true that you need jobs and you need a package. That is true. I can't deny that, because a lot of India is still coming out of the middle income trap, as you can call it, or whatever, right? But you will have to infuse a larger idea that when life presents you with an opportunity, then you make the most of it and do what possibly I did, right? So if this idea is not infused in your mind, it will not happen. It will not come from nowhere. If somebody early in your adulthood has told you this, that your purpose of life is beyond just your pay package, right? Then when the time comes, that germinates, that thought germinates, and you'll possibly do something bigger, right? So we are preparing our learners for that scenario. And there's an education model behind it and how we have designed the curriculum. Because we just can't say a slogan and not do anything different from what others are doing, right? The slogan has to translate into the day-to-day academic curriculum at Rishihood. A lot of work on that. And
the career tracks and the programs that you have now make sense. Like, I was very curious why you had picked the CSIT AI division, psychology, design, and business. Like, very different fields, but particularly picked ones. So, but now they make sense that you were thinking about something about the future and making impact, just not for today, but for tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll just build on this, because what you had said earlier, I want to connect back to that. It is not that the opportunities exposure is less. That is true, right? So you made a statement saying that, engineering and medicine are still the only things that Indian youth think about. It is true. The statement is true, but it is also true that people are looking for jobs that can pay them well, right? Not everybody in India has the luxury of saying that I will choose arts, or I'll choose history, I will choose anthropology, I will choose something else, right? Journalism. They don't pay as much, right? That is a reality. People have seen that the technology sector or the entrepreneurship sector has transformed lives, brought prosperity to the families that have chosen this path. So that's the biggest aspiration. I think if you come to India and you meet a bunch of people in their 12th grade and ask them what they believe is the most impactful thing to change their lives, they would still say technology education, entrepreneurship. And to complete this, design is something that we are pushing for, because design is also, it completes the triangle, right? You can't do technology and entrepreneurship without knowing design. And psychology is important for its own reasons, right? But I'm saying we have to also be mindful that there's a huge segment of Indian society that's immensely talented and is looking for a good education to bring them out of where they are, right? And you have to offer that opportunity. And that's the whole Economics Times article that I wrote also, right? The problem is good quality education in the sectors doesn't exist. There is no good technology education beyond the top IITs, which is about 1,000 seats. Imagine 12 lakh people giving the IIT JEE exam and you have only 1,000 seats in computer science. I mean, it's injustice you can't say only 1,000 smart people in the country, right? Secondly, even in business education, most business education in the country, like the West, is for business professionals. So you become an HR professional, you become a management professional, you become a consulting professional, or you become a strategy professional. But the Indian story is entrepreneurship, right? It's a very different story. You can't do an MBA program there and copy it to a program here. Here people want to do startups, they want to create jobs, they want to work for startups, right? There's whole risk appetite today. But there is no training. If I have to go and run a startup, nobody's trained me for it. So that is why the entrepreneurship education comes in. Design also comes in because a lot of what the Indian Prime Minister says or the Indian government is saying is called Make in India. But then manufacturing is still downstream. It is a low value added thing. The design still happens in Cupertino, Bay Area, right? So what Apple designs there are low skilled labor in Tamil Nadu might make it. But we can't, the value is not there. Bulk of the value is taken by Apple in Cupertino, right? So why are we not designing in India? So we are only manufacturing in India. The next step naturally is that you have to also design in India. Because India has a very different ergonomic need. India has a very different aesthetic sense. But we just copy designs from Italy on furniture or fashion and just apply it here. It doesn't work. So design is very, very important. So it's coming from a societal need and also an aspiration to solve Indian problems. That's how the curriculum is designed. Yeah.
Quite a few of the things that you mentioned just now, Shobhit, I mean, they're sort of triggering a series of questions in me just now. So the one thing that you mentioned earlier was the youth wants to explore opportunities or avenues once they've had this thought or the desire to do good infused in their mind. I want to take a step back from here. How do we ignite that sense of purpose in their minds, and early on in their formative years? Because, and especially in today's time when there's such an ocean of conflicting advice out there, like if I can tell you like my observations among the youths today, I don't know if you're across like the influencers or the leading figures out there on, the webverse and on the social media sphere. There are some very divisive figures, say the Tate brothers, for example, who are peddling out a lot of advice. So I do see good coming out of it as well, in that young people are hitting the gym and getting into good shape and very intent on that early on. But the life philosophy that comes as part of that package is not the best. It's, a kind of immature and not holistic entirely. So what do parents, grown-ups, or, people like us who can curate those influences for them to an extent do to ignite that sense of purpose, or, have them start thinking about the bigger questions early on?
Okay, that's a good question. See, again, India is not homogeneous. They call it India 1, India 2, India 3. There are different ways people define India, right? So there is one segment is what you are saying. See, what has happened, the big time thing is nuclear families, migration, single child. These are big phenomenons actually, right? So you have come out of your setup of a larger family. Both your parents are working and you have one child, right? So there is, the parents are pouring in whatever they have earned for the education because it's one kid, highly pampered, right? South Delhi, South Bombay, Bangalore, right? So those type of people are still there, right? So their challenges are very different. A lack of purpose could come from a very different thing, right? So there's, I have everything. There is no purpose. My dad made it big, right? For me, now it's about possibly going to a good fancy college and then going abroad, or then maybe handling my dad's business, or traveling, right? This could be one thing, which is a lack of meaning because there is no direction given to what should you be achieving next, right? There's no challenge left in front of me. That's a different problem because they have been brought up in that sense. They have always been insulated from societal issues, right? They have been brought up in a very different way. I think, but that's not true. The bulk of the country has a very strong purpose, right? The youth have, see, this whole internet reach and mobile devices reach. The influencers you are watching is being watched by the same person in some Assam village. It's true. And you will see the whole data affordability and all this. We keep hearing fascinating stories about this, right? So the exposure is tremendous. Now, how do you make sense of this exposure is one problem, right? Because you hear conflicting views, so many opinions. Every time you open the phone, somebody's saying something. That's one. Secondly, now that I have the exposure, my aspirations have increased, but my opportunities in front of me don't exist. So there's frustration that this guy made rags to riches story, right? Amazing story, Shark Tank. Oh, these guys got funding, right? But then what about me? So people are looking for opportunities and there is some frustration that there is no opportunities. So exposure is not missing. So let's be clear, both in India 1 and India 2 or 3, you can call it, exposure is not missing. It is about one is not looking at opportunities or the challenge is very different of meaninglessness or purposelessness. But one, it is a lack of opportunities. So anything that we offer, which is good quality, people are willing to pay for it and take it today. For example, education. I think India possibly will have the highest intent on spending on education. There is a survey that was done recently. People can spend about 30-40% of their savings on their children's education. That is the intent. You just give me good quality education, right? And I'll take it. But again, there's a challenge. There's not too much of that happening. So it's a big gap. There will always be this problem of too much information, somebody counseling them and mentoring them to make sense of all these choices. That is where opportunities are. I see a huge number of career counseling startups which are there. Good schools now have counselors on board, right? Full-time on board. So parents will spend on counseling. Parents will spend on a good college. Parents will spend on, if they have to go abroad, they'll take up loans, sell their lands, send them off. Because everything is seen as a ticket to prosperity, right? So that is there. So, and naturally when there's a market gap in this, things will emerge. So Rishihood is a consequence of that. Right? Good quality private education, which is affordable, but still not public education, which is free, right? So that is, we would not exist if there was no intent to spend. Secondly, career counselors I meet every day, a huge number of them. So many startups that are there, that are doing this, and people are accessing their services and willing to pay for it. We would not do it. People are chasing rankings. So yeah, it's there. It is a trend that is changing. But the intent is very, very high in the tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. It's very, very high.
The children themselves, though, I mean, do you think there might arise this sort of dissonance? Because there's a vision that they think they have, but which is mostly induced vision. But their own vision for themselves arising from exploration or, making sense of the world. Do you think those might be at odds with each other at times?
See, I think we should not underestimate the impact of social media. Social media has played a huge role. Your parents might talk to you for an hour over the dining table, right? But social media is talking to you for 6-7 hours a day. So you are able to make false assumptions about life, which may not be completely true with ground realities. For example, you may think, oh, this guy joined McKinsey, he made it big, he went for a weekend trip to Thailand, posted pics from the beach, right? So everybody can have this lifestyle. It's not true. People cannot have that lifestyle, right? It's and possibly it is not what you're seeing is not true as well, right? So that is one big challenge, that life is much more difficult. You have to deal with real people. It is not your avatars on your phone. There will be failures. People behave in very, very different ways from what you imagine them to be. So this is the complexities of life. There's a big dissonance between what we perceive life to be in the Hollywood movies or OTT platforms on social media, as opposed to what the real world throws at you once you come out of home. So I see this happening all the time, even at Rishihood. Till about 12th, they are in their coaching centers for the bulk of the time and social media, and they end up here. And then now you say that, dude, you are not going to get that big job which you are aspiring for unless you go through this very difficult maths education, right? So then they're like, okay, I didn't know this, right? Because this was never told to me. So this hits them very hard. Yeah, that's one conflict that I see. I think, yes, there is dissonance between what does it take to get a good life. Nobody has told them this. It has not been a part of your parenting. It has not been a part of your competitive exam coaching. It has not been a part of higher education also, right? So higher education, you come, I am teaching you subjects. Nobody's teaching you life, but then actually you're preparing you for life, right? So we say it's not our responsibility, parents will take care. Parents will say they're no more at home, they're with you, you take care, right? Society say anyway they're disconnected. So there's no buddy guiding them on this. So that's a challenge, and that has to be solved. The way it has happened in India is people jump into the deep end of the pool, somehow figure it out and do it. some people fall by the wayside, but that's not a good way to do it. You will have to create those structural support systems, because many people don't make it through all this, right? They break down, a lot of things happen, right? So as universities, this is something that we like it or not, we have signed up for it, because we are like their parents for 4 years between the time they leave home and they're ready for professional life. And this is a very, very critical phase of their life. More and more universities will start playing the role of a life coach. We'll have to coach. We'll have to keep coaching, because subjects they pick up through internet and ChatGPT today, I think this is nobody going to train them on this. So our role, I see in the next 10 years, transitioning more and more towards mentoring, life coaching, counseling, and preparing them for life than subject matter. That is going to be a lesser challenge, because that will be picked up by experts. I mean, the global experts who can teach them that. But you need somebody sitting across the table and talking to you. There is no support systems for that. I think that has to emerge.
So what I'm hearing is the next opportunities lie in creating more opportunities. So if people start thinking in that sense, if students or the youth of India, they want to think about what's next in the future, what should I prepare for? I think what you're saying is you need to prepare for creating more opportunities for other people.
So startups, I would count Rishihood also as a startup, because we are working with human talent, right? So that is the thing, right? You have to create opportunities. Youth bulge is huge. I'll give you a statistic. About 1 crore students, that is 10 million students, every year enter into higher education in India. And for every 10 million who enter, 30 million don't. They drop out. They don't go to college. That's a huge number. So it has to be youth focused. It has to be opportunities. It has to be job creation. Anything that works on that front is successful.
Another thing that you mentioned, Shobhit, earlier just hit home so much, in that you said the narrative of travel, for example, as you mentioned, like just sipping, drinks by the beach, or, that is being made out to be travel. Vis-a-vis, you also said earlier that your own life and your worldview changed after travel. The difference is in, the intent, in that you were seeking out immersive travel. You wanted to get into you wanted to be one with the people. You wanted to just...
If you create such experiences, people are willing to take. So never imagine that people are not ready for it. I mean, it would be wrong to dismiss Indian youth saying that they all want to go to Thailand. It's not true. If you create very good rural immersion, they're all willing to take it. So part of our curriculum in the second month when they enter campus is to spend 1 week in the hills, right? So we'll take them and they will have to meet the people there. Nobody would say, oh, sir, what is this? Oh, hardship, I have to trek. I can't be going out in the open, right? This is not for me. No, they want this. It's just that nobody has created these opportunities for them. So rural immersion startups several of them are there. They are wanting to engage with education and say, okay, we will take you out. So experiences, people want this. But it is about the vision of the person that is limited. If we create that, it will go to take off. It happens.
I just wanted to get your thoughts in on another thing, Shobhit. So it would have come to your notice that while we are once again beginning to talk about in recent years about the reawakening of the Renaissance person and portfolio careers, and being deep generalists. So do you think all of these are just still being thrown around as buzzwords, or is there really substance or promise behind them in our country, in our economy? How do you see the importance of these playing out in the next few years? Do you think we can actually internalize the philosophy behind it? Like owning, working with multiple identities?
So in this whole global committee of ideas, right, which are being bombarded every day. For example, what's happening in Israel, right? You have to take a stand. It is today become a common issue. It's true in the US college campuses, but it all flows down here as well, right? So what's your stand on this? It becomes an election debate. What stand should India take? I don't know what to take. I mean, this whole sense of where do I stand in this whole debate of ideas? What is the political stance that I take? This is not very clear to people. So that is, you cannot ignore it anymore. Earlier, you could ignore it and get on with life because you are not bombarded with all these different opinions that are coming towards you and forcing you to take a stand. Today, you have to. You can avoid it up to high school, but in college, you have to, or in the workplace, you have to, right? So, this is something that I think people are dealing with in a difficult way because there's nobody again to kind of help them discover this, right? So the parents are not exposed to it as much. And then suddenly the world has opened up for you. So you get stuck into this, then you make mistakes, you get embarrassed, and then it's all in public domain. So you can't take it back, and then you lose friends. So conversations are becoming highly political. The polarization is there, so you're forced to take stand. There is no space for nuance. This plays on people's minds, right? So you may try to insulate yourself, but then you'll be left out. So this is one challenge, right? Now I use the word deep generalist. How will the future look like? I don't know how. I think there's a lot of debate. I keep reading stuff all the time. I don't know how the workplace could be, what will be the future of jobs. But what is definitely true is expertise will be very, very easily available. I mean, with the whole emergence of AI and all, you may see some of it may say it's a fad or not, but it is getting there. All of us are surprised by the trend, right? Good or bad. So this is going to only happen. This will further create an identity crisis because I was supposed to be a good doctor till yesterday. Suddenly some other machine is trying to be a better radiologist than me. So what is my purpose, right? I was a programmer till yesterday, but now the machine has replaced me. So what is my purpose? How am I uniquely contributing to civilization in that sense, right? That otherwise I have in fact become a slave of the machines. This is going to create a huge identity crisis because subject matter expertise will not differentiate you anymore. Because this whole, it's a cognitive revolution, right? So much of computing power is going to come about that you cannot differentiate yourselves purely by your skill set. So your attitudes, your soft skills, all these things become immensely important. There will be a lot of identity crisis there, and I don't know how we will handle it, but it is true. This is emerging already. I see it in my classroom. I see it in my faculty members, for example, right? So as soon as they teach something, they are being fact checked, right? Because it's Google, right? And then there is something better to learn from ChatGPT, right? Assignments are being done by AI. So faculty feel a sense of loss, right? Okay, what's my purpose anymore? Because anyway, things can be done differently. Students feel a sense of loss, right? So because if you start plagiarizing, if you start doing things because you feel something's accessible, deep down somewhere there's a lack of self-worth, right? So you feel the sense of loss that, I'm not good enough, right? So this is going to be a big problem. So the age of AI, as the way it's rapidly evolving, will create a lot of identity crisis across everybody. I see school teachers completely lost. I mean, I'm taking this problem much deeper. Didn't even know how to use a mobile phone, and by that time AI has come in, right? So student naturally feels that my teacher is digitally illiterate, right? She doesn't know anything, and this is not an age for her to reskill herself, right? She's 50 years old. She's been a tremendously well-respected teacher so far in her life. But suddenly the new chap who walks into her classroom sees that she doesn't know much. So, she's not respected for her expertise. So there's a loss of purpose and identity across age groups. And I don't know where this will end. So people say, no, it will be a creative economy. People will find creative pursuits. Machine will do all the hard work for us. But the transition to that stage might not be smooth. That might happen 20, 30 years later. But before that, a lot of destruction will happen. And then maybe some creation will happen. So, and I don't know as society how we handle this change.
There'll be a good few years of water trying to find its own level before,
It's going to be, I see it everywhere. My mother-in-law, she's a school teacher, very well respected science teacher. But suddenly she's now being trained by her school on ChatGPT, right? What? She's like, why are you teaching me all this? This is not my... I never defined myself this. But then, ma'am, if you don't know this, how will you create assignments? How will you check assignment? She's like, okay, I have to go back to doing all this now. Right? So it's happening everywhere. So, yeah.
So our role would perhaps in the long run, probably in the very long run, would be as a synthesizer of ideas and identifying points of intersection.
As I said, life coaching, counseling, and helping people identify purpose, helping them do higher pursuits. And synthesizing is an interesting word that you used, because when there is a deluge of information, opinions, how do you keep all this in your head and make sense of it? We are not trained for it. We are trained for simplistic conclusions, right? You choose a side quickly and you go there. But no, the world is not like that, right? I mean, that is easy on social media, but the real world is not like that. There's no nuance. How do you strike conversations, right? How do you mine knowledge out of the elders, right? We don't know. We don't even know how to talk to our grandparents. It's a big loss. So, yeah, I think these will be the things that will be needed. Might be underestimated now, but as the other things develop, this is what we are supposed to do.
One last question, if that's okay. So what would be your message in general to the youth?
I think if I'm talking to the youth through you, I would say that despite whatever we discussed, right, there's a huge, we are at a very historic moment in, I mean, the generational shifts that are happening, right? There is abundant prosperity, lot of opportunities which didn't just exist, forget about your parents, just 10 years back. So many things are out there. The world is out there for us to get. So it is, but I think what will differentiate and what we have to work is some very strong hard skills on our side, right? Nothing is going to be easy. When things are easily accessible, obviously with the competition, it becomes all the more difficult to get it. So you will have to reflect, introspect deep down about yourselves and build on some core skills of yourself, right? It is, the world doesn't come to an end through a competitive exam or through your first job or maybe even your 10 years of job experience. The opportunities are opening up every day, but the person who is resilient, adaptive, constantly learning, form shifting, right? This type of person is the person who will survive. Nothing is a done deal, I would say. I think people make those conclusions very early. The first breakup, the first job, the first rank that they get in a competitive exam, all these things is not the end. I think the world is going through a severe transformation and that is a churn. It is not for the bad. Good things will emerge out of it, but the ones who will grab it are the ones who are prepared for it. So we'll have to prepare accordingly is what I would just conclude by saying. I'm still a very optimist. So I think we are headed to a golden age in many ways, but we'll have to be prepared for it. It's not going to be offered to us on a platter.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was wonderful listening to all your ideas and your journey.
Thank you.
And such an insightful conversation. We prognosticated various future scenarios and really some very solid advice on how to adapt and how to navigate the times to come. So thank you so much, Shobhit, for it.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you, Abhinav.